The first thing I registered was the cold. Not the damp chill of my prison cell, but the biting cold of a winter night seeping through the thin silk of my sleeves. My eyes flew open, and I was staring at the familiar vermilion pillars of the Qingfeng Palace, the moonlight casting long, skeletal shadows across the floor. I was lying on the cold stone tiles, my body aching, a sharp pain radiating from my left temple. The last thing I remembered was the taste of blood and hemlock in my mouth, the mocking laughter of the Empress echoing in my ears as the world went dark. But here I was, breathing. Alive. Before I could even process the impossibility of it, a shrill voice cut through the silence. "Get up, you worthless creature. Do you think lying there like a dead dog will make His Highness pity you?" I turned my head, wincing at the pain, and saw Mother Qin, the head eunuch's wife, looming over me. Her face was twisted in contempt, a heavy wooden basin in her hands. In my past life, I had cowered before her, a pathetic, orphaned bride the Emperor had forced upon the prince as a cruel joke. I had been meek, terrified, and desperate for any scrap of kindness. That desperation had been my undoing. But I was no longer that girl. I had died, and in dying, I had seen the truth. This was the night I had been caught sneaking out of the prince's chambers, a crime orchestrated by the Empress's spies to give her an excuse to have me beaten and sent to the cold palace. The beating had left me with a fever that lasted a week, a permanent scar on my temple, and a reputation in tatters. The prince, unable to defy the Empress, had been forced to publicly denounce me. It was the first step in the Empress's long game to destroy any possible ally I could have been to him. "I asked you a question." Mother Qin shrieked, and I saw her hand rise, the basin tilting. The icy water was meant to shock me, to humiliate me further. Adrenaline flooded my veins. I scrambled to my feet, my limbs protesting violently. "Don't," I said, my voice hoarse but steady. It was the first time I had ever spoken back to her. She was so taken aback that she froze, her arms still raised. "What did you say to me, you little wretch?" I said. "Don't," I repeated, my mind racing. I knew what was coming. The Empress's chief eunuch, Li De, was hidden just behind the screen in the main hall, waiting to witness my rebellion. In my past life, I had been too afraid to defy Mother Qin, so the Empress's next plan had been put into motion. But if I resisted now, Li De would step out, declare me insubordinate, and have me thrown into the dungeons, a much worse fate. I had to give him nothing. I took a shaky breath, forcing my body to tremble, not from fear, but from calculated weakness. I clutched my head, the pain from my temple a convenient prop. "Forgive me, Mother Qin," I whispered, making my voice small and pitiful. I think I hit my head. I am dizzy and confused. I was coming to find Lady Cui to ask for some medicine. I don't know how I ended up here." My mention of Lady Cui, the prince's trusted physician, was a deliberate choice. It was a mundane, perfectly logical explanation for why I might be near the inner chambers. It gave Li De nothing. No defiance, no treason. Just a clumsy, pathetic, and easily verifiable lie about a headache. I saw Mother Qin's eyes narrow, her mouth opening to retort. But then, from behind the screen, there was a soft cough. A signal. "Let her go." Mother Qin's face contorted with suppressed fury. "Get out of my sight," she hissed, spitting the words like venom. "And stay away from His Highness's quarters unless you are summoned." I bowed my head, a perfect picture of submission. "Yes, Mother Qin." I retreated, my back scraping against the cold stone pillar, and made my way into the shadows of the garden. As soon as I was out of sight, I let out a long, shuddering breath. The first trap had been avoided. But my victory was a tiny flame against the storm that was brewing. The year was still the same. The Empress was still on her throne, and the Crown Prince, my unwanted husband, was trapped in his own prison of silence. My heart was still pounding as I stumbled through the winding paths of the East Palace. The familiar sights assaulted me with their cruel familiarity. The gnarled old plum tree where I had once hidden from the guards, the stone bridge where I had slipped and broken my wrist, the lonely pavilion where I had spent countless nights weeping. Every corner of this place held a memory of my past suffering. But now, those memories were weapons. I had lived through this nightmare once. I would not live through it again. I reached my quarters, a tiny, drafty room in the forgotten corner of the palace. The door creaked on its hinges as I pushed it open. The room was exactly as I remembered it, a narrow cot with threadbare blankets, a chipped porcelain basin, a small wooden chest that contained my meager possessions. And there, sitting on the edge of my cot, was my only ally in this entire world. Miss, you're back. The young maid scrambled to her feet, her round face pale with worry. It was Chunhua, my personal attendant, a girl of 15 with a kind heart and a sharp tongue. She had been the only person in my past life who had shown me any loyalty, and she had paid for it with her life. The Empress's guards had beaten her to death while she tried to protect me from their fists. Chunhua, I breathed, and the name came out broken. I crossed the room in 3 quick strides and pulled her into my arms. She stiffened in surprise. In my past life, I had never embraced her. I had been too afraid, too lost in my own misery to offer comfort to anyone else. Miss, what happened to you? Chunhua pulled back, her eyes scanning my face. Your temple is bleeding. And your robes are torn. Did someone hurt you? The concern in her voice nearly undid me. I had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. There was no time for tears. There was no time for sentiment. The Empress would strike again, and I needed to be ready. Chunhua, listen to me carefully, I said, gripping her shoulders. I need you to do exactly as I say. Can you do that? She nodded, her eyes wide but steady. Good. I need you to go to the kitchens. I know the head cook, old Zhang, keeps a small store of dried ginger root. Tell him you have a stomach ailment and need a few pieces. Do not tell him it's for me. Do you understand? Chunhua nodded again, though confusion flickered across her face. Also, I need you to find out who is on guard duty at the North Gate tonight. Without asking directly. Listen to the servants' gossip. Find out if it's Captain Liang's men or General Wei's men. Captain Liang is loyal to the Crown Prince, Chunhua said, her voice barely a whisper. General Wei's men are the Empress's. Exactly, I said. And if it's General Wei's men, we have a problem. Now go. Quickly. And be careful. Chunhua slipped out of the room, and I was alone. I sank onto the cot, my legs suddenly unable to support me. The adrenaline was fading, and in its place came a bone-deep exhaustion. But I couldn't rest. Not yet. Not when every moment counted. I reached into the wooden chest and pulled out a small, worn pouch. Inside was a single hairpin, a simple piece of carved jade that had belonged to my mother. It was the only thing I had inherited from her, the only proof that I had once been loved by someone. In my past life, I had sold this hairpin for a loaf of bread during my final days in the cold palace. I had regretted it every moment until my death. This time, I would keep it. This time, I would use it as a reminder of what I was fighting for. But I couldn't dwell on the past. The present was far too dangerous. I paced the tiny room, my mind racing through the events of my previous life. The Empress's plans were intricate, layered, and devastating. But they were also predictable. She followed the same patterns, relied on the same allies. General Wei, her brother, commanded the Imperial Guard. The chief eunuch, Li De, controlled the flow of information throughout the palace. And the Emperor's personal physician, a man named Zhang Yuan, was secretly in her employ, administering the slow poison that was killing the Emperor day by day. The poison was the key. The Emperor's illness was the linchpin of everything. Without it, the Empress had no leverage. Without it, the succession was clear. The Crown Prince was the rightful heir, and no amount of political maneuvering could change that. But how could I prove the poisoning? I had no evidence. I had no allies. I was a nobody, a forgotten bride with no power and no resources. Then I remembered. In my past life, I had overheard a conversation between 2 of the Empress's maids. They had been gloating about the Emperor's failing health, laughing about how easy it was to slip the poison into his tea. One of them had mentioned a detail, a tiny, almost insignificant detail that I had dismissed at the time, but now burned in my memory like a brand. The poison was stored in a small porcelain jar, hidden in the Empress's personal chambers. It was kept in a secret compartment behind a loose brick in the wall, beneath a painting of peonies. The jar was sealed with a red wax stamp that bore the mark of a crane. The Empress had stolen that mark from the Imperial Pharmacy, a signature that would be recognized by any of the Emperor's physicians. If I could get to that jar, if I could expose it to the Emperor's trusted officials, I could unravel the Empress's entire plot. But getting into her chambers was impossible. They were guarded day and night by her most loyal soldiers. I would be caught and killed before I even reached the door. Unless I didn't have to go in myself. I stopped pacing, my heart racing with a new idea. What if I could find someone else to retrieve the jar, someone who had access to the Empress's chambers without raising suspicion? Someone like the Emperor's personal physician, Zhang Yuan. If I could expose the doctor's treachery, I could turn him against the Empress. He had the access. He had the expertise. He could be my weapon. But how could I turn him? How could I make a man who was so deeply in the Empress's pocket switch sides? I remembered something else from my past life, a secret that had come to light only after my death. Zhang Yuan had a daughter, a young woman named Zhang Mei, who was secretly in love with a low-ranking guard in the prince's household. The Empress had discovered the affair and was using it as leverage to control the doctor. If I could help Zhang Mei escape, if I could remove the Empress's leverage, I might be able to win Zhang Yuan's loyalty. It was a long shot. It was dangerous, reckless, and incredibly stupid. But it was the only plan I had. I was still turning the idea over in my mind when Chunhua returned. She slipped through the door like a ghost, her cheeks flushed from the cold night air. Miss, I got the ginger root, she said, holding out a small cloth bundle. And I heard about the guards. It's Captain Liang's men at the North Gate tonight. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Captain Liang's men. That was good. That meant I had a small window of opportunity. The prince's allies were guarding the gate tonight. If I could get a message to Captain Liang, I might be able to reach the prince himself. Chunhua, I need you to do one more thing for me, I said, taking her hands in mine. I need you to deliver a message to Captain Liang. Tell him that the night-blooming jasmine is in full bloom in the Eastern Garden. Chunhua stared at me, completely confused. Miss, that doesn't make any sense. The night-blooming jasmine doesn't bloom until autumn. It's the middle of winter. I smiled, a small, grim smile. I know. That's exactly why he'll understand. The night-blooming jasmine was a code phrase I had devised in my past life. I had never had a chance to use it, but I had planned it carefully. The jasmine bloomed out of season only when the prince was in danger. It was a warning, a signal that he needed to act quickly. Chunhua still looked uncertain, but she nodded. I'll do it, Mississippi. I'll find him and deliver your message. She slipped out again, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I clutched the ginger root in my hands, the rough texture grounding me. I had avoided one trap. I had set 2 plans in motion. But the night was far from over. I sat on the edge of my cot and waited. The minutes crawled by, each one feeling like an hour. I heard the distant sound of guards changing shifts, the muffled footsteps of servants moving through the corridors. The palace was never truly silent, but tonight, every sound seemed amplified, every creak and whisper filled with menace. Then I heard it. A soft knock on my door, barely audible. 3 quick taps, then 2 slow ones. It was the signal I had told Chunhua to use. I opened the door, and my heart nearly stopped. Standing in the shadows was not Chunhua. It was Captain Liang, his broad face pale and grim. Behind him, I saw the faint outline of 2 other guards, their hands on their swords. Your Highness, Captain Liang said, bowing his head. You sent for me. My throat went dry. This was not what I had planned. I had expected a message to be delivered, not for the captain himself to come. Captain Liang, I managed, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean for you to come yourself. He stepped closer, his eyes searching my face. Your message said the night-blooming jasmine was in bloom. That's the prince's personal signal. It's only ever used in case of extreme emergency. I had to come. I nodded, my mind scrambling. There's a plot, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. The Empress is planning to poison the Emperor. She's been doing it for months. The poison is hidden in her chambers, behind a loose brick in the wall beneath a painting of peonies. It's sealed with a red wax stamp bearing the mark of a crane. Captain Ling's face went white. How do you know this? It doesn't matter how I know, I said, stepping closer. What matters is that we stop her. You have to get a message to the prince. You have to tell him what's happening. He's in his chambers, Captain Liang said. He's under house arrest. I can't get to him. Then find a way, I said, my voice fierce. Your duty is to the crown prince, not to the guards who keep him prisoner. If you're truly loyal to him, you'll find a way. Captain Liang stared at me for a long moment. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between duty and loyalty. Then, slowly, he nodded. I'll find a way, he said. But you must be careful. If the Empress discovers you're the one who sent me, she'll have you killed. I smiled, a cold, bitter smile. She already tried. I'm still here. Captain Liang gave me one last look, then slipped back into the shadows. The guards behind him melted into the darkness. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, my heart pounding, my hands trembling. I had just thrown a stone into the Empress's carefully ordered pond. The ripples were already spreading. There was no going back now. I closed the door and leaned against it, my legs threatening to give way. The night was still young, and the storm was only beginning. But for the first time since I had opened my eyes on that cold stone floor, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt hope. I did not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the Empress's face, twisted in that final moment of triumph as the hemlock burned its way down my throat. I saw the mocking curve of her lips, heard the cold satisfaction in her voice as she whispered, "You were never more than a pawn, little girl. And pawns are meant to be sacrificed." So I stayed awake, my back pressed against the cold wall of my tiny room, the jade hairpin clutched in my fist like a talisman. I counted the hours by the changing patterns of moonlight on the floor. I listened to the distant sounds of the palace, the creak of a door, the murmur of voices, the soft padding of servants' feet. Every sound could be a threat. Every shadow could hide a knife. Dawn came slowly, a pale gray light seeping through the paper window. My body ached from the long night, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. I had survived the first night. I had set my plans in motion. Now I had to survive the day. Chunhua arrived with a tray of thin rice porridge and a single pickled vegetable. Her face was pinched with worry, dark circles under her eyes mirroring my own exhaustion. Miss, the palace is in an uproar, she whispered, setting the tray down on the rickety table. Captain Liang was arrested last night. They say he tried to break into the prince's chambers. My heart seized in my chest. Arrested. Of course. The Empress's spies were everywhere. Of course she had been watching. Of course she had anticipated our move. Is he alive? I managed, my voice barely a croak. Chunhua nodded, her eyes wide. They say he's in the dungeons, waiting for the Empress's judgment. The prince has been confined even more strictly. They've stationed General Wei's personal guards outside his door. I closed my eyes, the weight of my failure pressing down on me. Captain Liang had been my best chance. He had been the prince's most loyal ally. And now he was lost. I had sent him to his doom. But even as the despair threatened to consume me, a cold clarity settled over my mind. Despair was a luxury I could not afford. Captain Liang was gone, but I was still here. The prince was still alive. The game was not over. Chunhua, I need you to find out everything you can about Zhang Yuan, the emperor's physician, I said, forcing my voice steady. His daily routines, his habits, where he goes, who he speaks to. I need to know everything. Chunhua's brow furrowed. Zhang Yuan, he's the empress's man, Mississippi. Everyone knows that. Not everyone, I said quietly. Not yet. She hesitated, then nodded. I'll do my best, Mississippi. But I must warn you, there are more spies in the palace than ever. The Empress is suspicious. She's been questioning everyone about the source of the captain's information. I felt a cold prickle run down my spine. Has anyone mentioned me? No, Mississippi. Not yet. But they will. It's only a matter of time. She was right. The Empress would not rest until she found the person who had tried to undermine her plans. And when she did, she would not be content with a simple execution. She would make an example of me, a warning to anyone else who dared to defy her. I ate my porridge mechanically, my mind racing through the scraps of information I had gathered in my past life. Zheng Yuan. His daughter, Zhang Mei. The secret affair with the guard. It was a thin thread, but it was all I had. Chunhua, when you go out, keep your ears open for any mention of Zhang Mei, I said. His daughter. She's young, maybe 17 or 18. She works in the embroidery workshop in the Eastern Compound. Chunhua's eyes widened. How do you know so much about these people? Miss, you've barely left this room since you arrived at the palace. I smiled, a tired, bitter smile. You'd be surprised what you can learn if you listen carefully enough. After she left, I sat in the oppressive silence of my room, staring at the cracked ceiling. The hours crawled by. I heard the servants passing in the corridor outside, their voices hushed and fearful. The palace was a nest of vipers, and everyone knew that someone had just poked a stick into the nest. It was well past midday when Chunhua returned. Her face was flushed, and she was breathing hard, as if she had been running. Miss, I found her, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. Zhang Mei. She's in the Eastern Compound, just like you said. But there's a problem. I leaned forward. What is it? She's been confined to her quarters. The Empress has ordered her to be watched. There's talk that she was seen speaking to a guard from the prince's household a few days ago. The Empress suspects her of treason. I felt a chill run through me. The Empress was already tightening her grip. She must have suspected the affair, or at least sensed that Zheng Yuan was not as loyal as he pretended to be. She was neutralizing potential threats before they could become real. But this was also an opportunity. The Empress had made a mistake. By confining Zhang Mei, she had given me a chance to reach her. If Zhang Mei was frightened, if she felt cornered, she might be willing to betray the Empress. She might be willing to help me. Chunhua, do you know the guard she was seen with? I asked. The one from the prince's household, Chunhua nodded. His name is Sun Wei. He's a young lieutenant in the East Palace Guard. I've seen him around. He has a kind face. The servants say he's been in love with Zhang Mei for years. I thought quickly. Sun Wei. A young lieutenant with a kind face. He was exactly the kind of person who could help me. If I could reach him, if I could get him to deliver a message to Zhang Mei, I might be able to turn the doctor. But how the palace was crawling with the Empress's spies. Any overt move would be noticed. I needed a plan that was subtle, invisible, something that would not attract attention. Then it came to me. The embroidery workshop. Zhang Mei was an embroiderer. If I could commission a piece of embroidery from her, it would be a perfectly normal thing for a member of the prince's household to do. The Empress's spies would not think twice about it. Chunhua, I need you to do one more thing for me, I said, reaching into my wooden chest and pulling out a small pouch of silver coins. It was all the money I had in the world. Take this to the embroidery workshop. Tell them I want to commission a new robe for the prince. A formal robe, for the upcoming New Year celebration. Tell them I want the best embroiderer they have. I want Zhang Mei. Chunhua stared at the pouch of coins, her mouth hanging open. But miss, that's all your money. You won't have anything left for food or medicine. I won't need food or medicine if I'm dead, I said bluntly. Just do it. And make sure you tell them that I want to see the designs in person. Tell them I will come to the workshop myself to discuss the patterns. Chunhua hesitated, then took the pouch. I'll do it, Mississippi. But be careful. The Empress's eyes are everywhere. She left again, and I was alone with my thoughts. The plan was risky. It was full of holes and potential dangers. But it was the only plan I had. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. I changed into my best robes, a simple but well-made garment of pale blue silk that had been a gift from the prince's mother, the late Empress. I had rarely worn it, saving it for special occasions. But today, I needed to look like a proper member of the prince's household. I needed to look like someone who had the authority to commission a robe for the crown prince. I brushed my hair and pinned it up with my mother's jade hairpin. I looked at my reflection in the small, tarnished bronze mirror. I looked tired. I looked frightened. But I also looked determined. I saw a fire in my eyes that had not been there before. It was the fire of someone who had died and been given a second chance. As the sun began to set, I made my way to the eastern compound. The journey was a perilous one. I had to navigate through the winding corridors of the palace, past the guards and the servants, past the eyes that watched and judged and reported back to the Empress. I kept my head down, my steps quick and purposeful. I tried to look like I was on an errand, a simple errand that was beneath anyone's notice. I could feel the weight of eyes on my back, but I did not turn around. The embroidery workshop was a small, quiet building at the edge of the eastern compound. The windows were dark, the doors closed. I knocked softly, my heart pounding. A young woman opened the door. She was beautiful, with delicate features and long, graceful fingers that were stained with dye. Her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she had been crying. "I'm looking for Zhang Mei," I said, keeping my voice low. "I'm here to discuss a commission for the prince's New Year robe." She stared at me for a long moment, suspicion flickering in her eyes. Then, slowly, she stepped aside. "I'm Zhang Mei. Please come in." I slipped inside. The workshop was cluttered with frames and fabric and spools of thread. A half-finished embroidery of a phoenix was stretched across a large frame in the corner, its tail feathers shimmering with gold thread. "I'm sorry to intrude," I said, turning to face her. "I know you're being watched. I know you're in danger. But I need your help." Zhang Mei's face went pale. "Who are you? How do you know about me?" "I'm the prince's wife," I said simply. "And I know about your affair with Sun Wei. I know the Empress has discovered it. I know she's using it to control your father." Zhang Mei's hands began to tremble. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You do," I said, stepping closer. "And I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to offer you a way out. If you help me, I can help you. I can help you and Sun Wei escape." She stared at me, her eyes wide and desperate. "Why would you do that? Why would you help a stranger?" "Because I need your father," I said bluntly. "I need him to help me expose the Empress's plot to poison the Emperor. He's the only one who has access to the evidence. If he turns against her, we can save the prince. We can save the empire." Zhang Mei shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. My father is terrified of the Empress. He would never betray her. She has too much power over him." "Not if we remove her power," I said. "If I can help you escape with Sun Wei, the Empress will lose her leverage. Your father will be free to do what is right." Zhang Mei was silent for a long moment. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the desperate hope warring with the paralyzing fear. Finally, she spoke. "What do you need me to do?" I let out a long, slow breath. "I need you to deliver a message to your father. Tell him that the night-blooming jasmine is in bloom in the Eastern Garden. He'll know what it means." She looked at me confused. "He's a physician, not a gardener. He won't understand." "He will," I said. "Just tell him. And tell him to come to me. I'll be waiting." I left the workshop quickly, my heart racing. The message was sent. The seed was planted. Now I could only wait and hope that it would grow. I made my way back to my quarters, the darkness closing in around me. The palace was quiet, but it was a dangerous quiet, the kind that preceded a storm. I could feel it in the air, the tension that crackled like lightning. I had just reached my door when I heard a voice behind me. "Your Highness." I froze. The voice was soft, feminine, and dripping with false sweetness. I turned slowly and saw a woman I recognized. It was Lady Zhao, one of the Empress's most trusted ladies-in-waiting. Her face was painted in delicate patterns, her robes were fine silk, and her smile was a knife. "Lady Zhao," I said, forcing my voice steady. "What a pleasant surprise." "Is it?" she asked, her smile widening. "I heard you've been very busy today. Commissioning a robe for the prince. Visiting the embroidery workshop. Such industriousness." My blood ran cold. She knew. Of course she knew. The Empress's eyes were everywhere. "I simply wanted to do something nice for my husband," I said, keeping my voice light. "Is that a crime?" "Of course not," Lady Zhao said, stepping closer. "But the Empress is concerned. She worries about you, you know. All alone in this big palace. So far from your family. So vulnerable." She reached out and touched my cheek, her fingers cold as ice. "Be careful, Your Highness." The palace is a dangerous place. You never know who might be listening. She turned and glided away, her robes whispering against the stone floor. I stood there, frozen, my heart hammering. She had been sent as a warning. The Empress knew I was up to something. She was closing in. I stumbled into my room and collapsed onto my cot. The game was changing. The Empress was no longer just a distant threat. She was here, in my face, daring me to make a move. And I would make a move. I had no choice. I stayed awake all night, listening for the sound of footsteps at my door. I waited for the guards to come, for the Empress's order of arrest. But no one came. The night passed in agonizing silence. Just before dawn, I heard a soft knock. 3 quick taps, then 2 slow ones. My heart leaped into my throat. I scrambled to the door and opened it. Standing in the shadows was an old man with a tired face and a long gray beard. He was wearing the robes of a physician, and in his hands, he carried a small wooden box. Zhang Yuan, I breathed. He bowed his head. Your Highness. The night-blooming jasmine is in bloom, you said. I came as quickly as I could. I pulled him inside and closed the door. You came. That means you know what I'm asking. He nodded, his face grim. I know what you're asking. I also know what you're risking. But I have a question for you, Your Highness. Why do you care? The prince has never shown you any kindness. He's never even spoken to you. Why risk your life for a man who treats you like a ghost? I looked at him, and for a moment, I was tempted to tell him the truth. To tell him about the past life I had lived, the suffering I had endured, the death I had died. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I was sure he could be trusted. Because he is my husband, I said simply. And because the Empress is evil. I would risk my life to stop her even if the prince were a stranger. Zhang Yuan studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. Very well. Tell me what I must do. Zhang Yuan's admission was the turning point. But as soon as the words left his lips, I saw the fear return to his eyes. He was a man caught in the coils of a serpent, and he had just agreed to bite the hand that held him. The poison is night-blooming jasmine root, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The Empress has been using it for months. Small doses, mixed into the Emperor's evening tea. It mimics the symptoms of a wasting illness. Weakness, confusion, fatigue. The imperial physicians have been treating him for a disease that doesn't exist. I nodded, my mind racing. Where is the poison kept? In the Empress's private chambers. There's a loose brick behind the painting of peonies. The jar is sealed with red wax, marked with the crane of the imperial pharmacy. If anyone finds it, they'll know it was stolen from the pharmacy's stores. Can you get to it? I asked. Can you retrieve it? Zhang Yuan's face went pale. The Empress's chambers are guarded day and night. Even I am not allowed in without her express permission. If I'm caught, she'll have me executed. She'll have my daughter executed. Not if we're careful, I said. Not if we have a plan. He looked at me, desperation flickering in his eyes. What kind of plan? I paced the tiny room, my mind churning. The Empress was too powerful, too well guarded. Any direct assault would fail. But there was another way. A way that didn't involve breaking into her chambers at all. The poison, I said, stopping mid-stride. You said it's night-blooming jasmine root. What if the Empress is forced to bring the poison to us? What if she has no choice but to reveal herself? Zhang Yuan stared at me. How could you possibly force the Empress to do anything by threatening what she values most? I said. Her son. The second prince. The name hung in the air between us. The second prince, the Empress's golden child, the ambitious fool who had been groomed for the throne. He was the Empress's weakness, the one thing she would do anything to protect. The second prince is planning to leave the capital tomorrow, I said, drawing on the memories of my past life. He's going to the northern border to inspect the troops. It's a military exercise, but it's also an excuse to stay away from the palace while his mother finishes her work. If I can intercept him, if I can make him believe the Empress is in danger, he'll rush back to the palace. He'll force his way into his mother's chambers. And when he does, he'll find the poison. Zhang Yuan's eyes widened. You want to use the second prince as your unwitting tool. I want to use his love for his mother against her, I corrected. He's arrogant and foolish, but he's fiercely protective of her. If he thinks she's in danger, he won't stop to think. He'll act. It's a gamble, Zhang Yuan said slowly. If the second prince discovers the plot, he'll have you killed. He won't discover the plot, I said. He'll discover the poison. And when he does, he'll demand answers from his mother. He'll be confused, angry, betrayed. He won't know what to believe. And that's when we'll step in. That's when we'll reveal the truth. Zhang Yuan was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. What do you need me to do? I need you to make sure the second prince is delayed, I said. Create a small emergency at the Imperial Pharmacy. A fire, or a flood, or a misplaced shipment. Anything that will make him wait another day. I need time to reach him before he leaves. Zhang Yuan's joy tightened. I can do that. But you must promise me something. What? Promise me you'll protect my daughter. If this goes wrong, if we're caught, I don't care what happens to me. But Zhang Mei must survive. I looked into his tired, desperate eyes and I saw a father's love. It was the same love my own father had felt for me, before he had died and left me alone in the world. I remembered the way he would look at me, the way he would hold me when I was afraid. I had not felt that warmth in years. I promise, I said. I will protect Zhang Mei with my life. Zhang Yuan bowed his head. Then I will do as you ask. He left as silently as he had arrived, slipping into the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost. I stood in my doorway, watching him go, and I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The pieces were moving. The plan was in motion. But I had no time to rest. I had to reach the second prince before he left the capital. I had to intercept him, capture his attention, and plant the seed of doubt in his mind. I dressed quickly, choosing my plainest robes. I could not afford to be noticed. I tied my hair back and covered it with a simple cloth. I looked like a servant, unremarkable and forgettable. It was exactly what I needed. The journey across the palace was a nightmare of stealth and silence. I moved through the shadows, hugging the walls, avoiding the pools of torchlight where guards patrolled. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced myself to move slowly, deliberately, like a cat stalking its prey. I reached the eastern gate just as the sun was beginning to rise. The second prince's carriage was being prepared, a magnificent gilded vehicle pulled by 4 white horses. Servants scurried around it, loading trunks and provisions. And there, standing near the carriage, was the second prince himself. He was tall, handsome, and impeccably dressed in rich robes of crimson and gold. His face was a mask of bored arrogance, the face of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. He was beautiful, I had to admit, but it was the beauty of a gilded cage, of a flower that had been forced to bloom in the wrong season. I approached him slowly, keeping my head down. I was just another servant, just another face in the crowd. I stopped a few feet away and waited. He noticed me. Of course he noticed me. He noticed everything. You there, he called out, his voice sharp and imperious. What are you doing here? This area is restricted. I raised my head and met his eyes. I have a message for you, Your Highness. A message from your mother. His eyes narrowed. My mother? Why would the Empress send a servant like you? She has her own messengers. Because the message is secret, I said, keeping my voice low. She told me to deliver it only when you were alone. The second prince hesitated. He was curious now, intrigued. I could see it in the way his eyes flickered, the way his fingers drummed against his thigh. Very well, he said, gesturing for his attendants to step back. Speak. I moved closer, lowering my voice to a whisper. The Empress is in danger, Your Highness. There is a plot against her. A plot to poison the Emperor and frame her for the crime. His face went pale. What are you talking about? Who would dare? I cannot tell you the names, I said, weaving my lie carefully. But I can tell you this. The evidence is hidden in her chambers. Behind a loose brick in the wall beneath the painting of peonies. If you go there now, you will find a jar sealed with red wax. In that jar is the poison that has been used to sicken the Emperor. The second prince stared at me, his eyes wide with shock. You're lying. This is a trick. Someone sent you to deceive me. No trick, Your Highness, I said. I am telling you the truth because I am loyal to the Empress. I cannot bear to see her destroyed by her enemies. I am risking everything by coming to you. If you do not believe me, go and see for yourself. But if you delay, the conspirators will strike. Your mother will be lost. He wavered. I could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the frantic flicker of his eyes. He wanted to believe me. He wanted to protect his mother. It was the only thing that made him vulnerable. "Leave," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Return to your duties. I will consider what you have told me." I bowed my head and retreated. I did not look back. I did not need to. I had planted the seed. Now I could only wait for it to grow. I made my way back to my quarters, my legs shaking with exhaustion. The sun was fully up now, the palace coming alive with the sounds of the day. I slipped into my tiny room and collapsed onto my cot, my heart still racing. Hours passed. I tried to rest, but my mind refused to quiet. I replayed every word, every gesture, looking for flaws in my plan. What if the second prince ignored my warning? What if he decided I was lying and had me arrested? What if the Empress discovered my betrayal before I could act? The doubts swirled like vultures, but I pushed them away. I had come too far to give up now. It was late afternoon when Chunhua burst through my door, her face flushed with excitement. "Miss, you won't believe what's happened." I sat up, my heart leaping. "What is it? Tell me." "The second prince has returned to the palace," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He arrived an hour ago, demanding to see his mother." I heard the servants talking. "He's in a rage. He's been shouting at the guards, threatening to tear the palace apart." A surge of triumph flooded through me. It worked. It actually worked. The second prince had gone to his mother's chambers, had found the poison, and was now confronting her. "Where are they now?" I asked, scrambling to my feet. "Where is the second prince?" "In the Empress's private hall," Chunhua said. "They've locked the doors. No one is allowed inside." I ran. I ran through the winding corridors, past the guards and servants, past the startled faces that stared at me in confusion. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I did not stop. I had to be there. I had to see it happen. I reached the Empress's private hall just as a crowd was gathering. The doors were closed, but I could hear the raised voices inside. The second prince's voice, sharp and accusatory. The Empress's voice, calm and measured, but with a thread of panic woven through it. "You've been poisoning him," the second prince shouted. "All this time, you've been poisoning the emperor. And you tried to make me the heir. You tried to make me complicit in your crimes. Son, you don't understand." The Empress's voice came through the door. "I did it for you. I did it for our family. The crown prince is weak, unfit to rule. The empire would have crumbled under his reign. You should have let it crumble," the second prince roared. "At least it would have been honest. At least we would have died with our honor intact." The doors burst open. The second prince stormed out, his face twisted with rage and betrayal. The Empress followed, her face pale but composed, her eyes starting around the crowd. And then she saw me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I saw the recognition flare in them. She knew. She knew I was behind this. Her face twisted with fury, and she pointed a trembling finger at me. "You," she shrieked. "You did this. You poisoned my son's mind against me. Guards, seize her." But the guards did not move. They looked at the Empress, then at the second prince, then back at the Empress. They were confused, uncertain. The second prince's rage had shattered their loyalty. "Seize her," the Empress screamed again. "I command you." The second prince turned to look at me. His eyes were wild, but there was something else in them now. Something that looked like respect. "Leave her," he said, his voice cold and commanding. "She is not the enemy here." The Empress stared at her son, her face contorted with disbelief. "Son, what are you doing? She is your enemy. She is the one who turned you against me. She is the one who showed me the truth," the second prince said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "And the truth is that my mother is a murderer. The truth is that my mother is a traitor." The Empress's face went white. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She was defeated. The poison was discovered. The conspiracy was exposed. But even as I watched the Empress's world crumble around her, I felt no triumph. I felt only exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness that threatened to drag me down. I had survived the first battle. I had won this round. But the war was far from over. The emperor was still dying. The crown prince was still imprisoned. And the Empress, though humiliated, was still alive. She would not stop. She would never stop. She would find a way to strike back, to reclaim her power, to destroy everyone who had betrayed her. I turned away from the scene, slipping back into the shadows. The crowd was still murmuring, the guards still uncertain. No one noticed as I walked away. I returned to my tiny room and closed the door behind me. The silence was oppressive, suffocating. I sank onto my cot and stared at the cracked ceiling, my mind swirling with thoughts. I had won a battle. But the war was just beginning. The days that followed the confrontation were a strange, suspended silence. The palace held its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The Empress had been confined to her chambers. The second prince had retreated to his own quarters in a state of sullen fury, and the Emperor's condition continued to worsen. The Crown Prince remained under house arrest, his guards doubled, his isolation absolute. And I, the forgotten bride, the pawn who had somehow tipped the board, found myself in the most dangerous position of all. I was no longer invisible. The servants looked at me differently now, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and fear. They whispered behind my back, their voices too low for me to catch, but the meaning was clear. I had become a player in the game, and everyone wanted to know whose side I was on. Chuanhua brought me my meals and news from the outside world. The information was thin, filtered through layers of gossip and speculation. The Empress had not been formally charged with any crime. The Emperor was too ill to issue any decrees, and the Crown Prince was still confined. The second prince had refused to speak to anyone, locking himself in his rooms and refusing all visitors. "Miss, the palace is in chaos," Chunhua whispered one evening, her face pale with worry. "The officials are arguing about who should take control. Some of them want to declare the Crown Prince as regent. Others are saying the second prince should take the throne. And the Empress, they say she's been sending secret messages to her brother, General Wei." My blood ran cold. General Wei, the man who commanded the most powerful army in the empire. If the Empress could reach him, if she could convince him to march on the capital, all our work would be undone. The Crown Prince would be killed, the second prince would be placed on the throne as a puppet, and the Empress would rule from behind the scenes. "We have to act," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We can't wait for the officials to decide. We have to free the prince before General Wei arrives." Chuanhua's eyes widened. "Free the prince, miss? That's impossible. His quarters are guarded by General Wei's personal men. They have orders to kill anyone who tries to enter." I paced the tiny room, my mind racing. I had been so focused on exposing the Empress that I had neglected the most important part of the plan. The Crown Prince was the key to everything. Without him, the Empress's downfall was meaningless. He had to be freed. He had to take his rightful place as the Emperor's successor. "Chunhua, do you know where the prince's guards are stationed?" I asked. "Do you know their rotations, their routines?" Chuanhua nodded, her face set in a grim expression. "I've been watching them, just like you asked. There are 6 guards at all times, 3 at the front door and 3 at the back. They change shifts every 4 hours. The new shift always arrives 5 minutes before the old shift leaves. It's the only time there's any confusion." I stopped pacing, a plan forming in my mind. 5 minutes. That's all we need. If we can create a distraction during the shift change, we might be able to slip the prince out without being noticed. "A distraction?" Chunhua asked. "What kind of distraction?" I thought about it. It had to be something big, something that would draw the guards' attention away from the prince's chambers. A fire. A fight. A false alarm. But it also had to be something that wouldn't be traced back to me. "Chunhua, do you know the servant who delivers the prince's meals?" I asked. "Yes, Mississippi. His name is Wang Wei. He's a quiet man. Keeps to himself. Can you get me a message to him?" I asked. "A message he can deliver to the prince?" Chuanhua hesitated. "I can try, Mississippi. But if anyone finds out, they won't," I said. "I need you to tell him to tell the prince this. When the bell tolls the evening hour tomorrow, he should be ready to move. The distraction will come from the east." Chuanhua looked confused, but she nodded. "I'll do my best, Mississippi." That night, I could not sleep. My mind was churning with plans and contingencies. What if the distraction failed? What if the guards noticed the prince escaping? What if the Empress had already anticipated our move and was waiting for us? I lay on my cot, staring at the ceiling, and I thought about the prince. In my past life, I had barely known him. He had been a distant, cold figure, a man who had been forced to marry a girl he did not want. I had been too scared to even look at him. I had spent my entire life in the palace avoiding him, afraid of his silence and his isolation. But now I saw him differently. He was not cold. He was cautious. He was a man who had been betrayed so many times that he had forgotten how to trust. He was a man who had been listening to the secrets of others for so long that he had lost his own voice. I had to free him. Not just because he was the key to the empire. Not just because he was the rightful heir. I had to free him because he deserved a chance. Because he deserved to be more than just a pawn in his mother's game. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. I could not eat, could not rest, could not focus on anything but the coming night. Chunhua came and went, her face pale and drawn. She had delivered the message. The prince was ready. I waited until the sun began to set, then I dressed in my darkest robes. I tied my hair back and covered my face with a veil. I looked like a servant, just another face in the crowd. I made my way to the eastern compound. My plan was simple. I had discovered a small store of fireworks in the eastern compound, left over from the New Year celebration. I would ignite them, creating a spectacular explosion that would draw the guards away from the prince's chambers. It was reckless and dangerous. The fireworks could easily kill me if I was not careful. But I had no other choice. It was the only distraction I could think of that would be big enough to work. I reached the storeroom and slipped inside. The fireworks were stacked in neat rows, their bright paper wrappers gleaming in the dim light. I selected a few large ones, the kind that would shoot high into the sky and explode in a shower of sparks. I carried them outside and arranged them in the courtyard. I lit the fuses and ran. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding, my lungs burning. I could hear the hiss of the fuses, the crackle of sparks, and then the deafening roar as the fireworks exploded. The sky lit up with a cascade of red and gold. I could hear shouting, the sound of running feet. The guards were abandoning their posts, rushing toward the source of the commotion. I ran toward the prince's chambers. The corridors were empty, the guards gone. I reached the front door and pushed it open. The prince was standing in the middle of the room, his face pale but composed. He was dressed in simple robes, his hair loose around his shoulders. He looked like a ghost, a shadow of the man he was supposed to be. "Your Highness," I said, my voice breathless. "You have to come with me. Now." He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the flicker of something in his eyes. Relief, recognition, it was too fast to read. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. It was the first time I had ever heard him speak out loud. "Somewhere safe," I said. "I've arranged for a boat to take you across the lake. There's a safe house in the mountains. We'll be safe there until the Empress is dealt with." He nodded, his face grim. "What about you?" "I'll be fine," I said. "I have a plan. Just trust me." He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching my face. Then he nodded again. I led him through the back corridors, keeping to the shadows. The palace was in chaos, the guards running in all directions. No one noticed us. We were just two more shadows in the darkness. We reached the lake just as the boat was pulling up to the shore. It was a small, simple vessel, barely large enough for two. The boatman was a stooped old man with a weather-beaten face. He nodded as we approached. "The safe house is 3 hours upstream," he said. "I'll have you there by dawn." The prince turned to look at me. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "For everything." I shook my head. "Don't thank me yet. The fight isn't over." He stepped into the boat, and I pushed it away from the shore. I watched as it drifted into the darkness, disappearing into the mist. I stood there for a long moment, my heart heavy with fear and hope. The prince was free. But the danger was far from over. I returned to my quarters, my body aching with exhaustion. I collapsed onto my cot and slept for the first time in days. I was awakened by a hand shaking my shoulder. Chunhua's face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. "Miss, wake up. The Empress's men are coming. They know the prince is gone." They're searching the entire palace. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding. They had discovered the escape sooner than I had expected. I had hoped for more time to disappear, time to hide. But the Empress's reach was long, and her anger was limitless. Chunhua, you have to go, I said, grabbing her arm. Go to the eastern compound and hide. Don't come out until I send for you. But miss, what about you? I'll be fine, I said, forcing a confidence I did not feel. I have a plan. Just trust me. Chunhua hesitated, then nodded. She slipped out of the room, and I was alone. I waited. I heard the pounding of feet in the corridor, the shouting of guards. They were getting closer. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The door burst open. General Wei stood in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. Behind him were a dozen armed men. Where is he? General Wei snarled. Where is the prince? I looked at him, my face calm, my heart racing. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, he roared. You helped him escape. I know it. Tell me where he is, or I will kill you. Kill me then, I said, meeting his eyes. But you will never find him. He's gone. He's beyond your reach. General Wei lunged forward, his hand closing around my throat. I gasped, my vision swimming. But I did not cry out. I did not beg. He released me, and I fell to the floor, gasping for breath. Take her to the dungeons, he ordered. And find the prince. Search every corner of the palace. He cannot have gone far. The guards seized me and dragged me away. I did not resist. There was no point. I had done what I had set out to do. The prince was free. The rest was up to fate. The dungeons were cold and dark, the air thick with the stench of rot and despair. I was thrown into a cell, the door slamming shut behind me. I lay on the damp stone floor, staring up at the ceiling, my body aching, my spirit unbroken. I had been here before. In my past life, I had died in a place like this. But this time, it was different. This time, I had hope. I had a plan. I had a future. The hours passed. I heard the sounds of the palace above me, the muffled shouts of guards, the distant clatter of footsteps. The search was still ongoing. The prince had not been found. Then, I heard footsteps approaching. The clang of a door, the jingle of keys. A guard appeared outside my cell, his face grim. You have a visitor, he said, unlocking the door. I was led out of the dungeon and up into the palace. The corridors were quiet now, the search apparently over. I was taken to the main hall, where the Empress was waiting. She was seated on the throne, her face pale but composed. Beside her stood General Wei, his expression thunderous. The second prince was nowhere to be seen. So, the Empress said, her voice cold and measured. You thought you could outwit me. You thought you could free the prince and destroy everything I have built. I thought I could do what was right, I said, meeting her eyes. Right, the Empress laughed, a bitter, mocking sound. There is no right or wrong. There is only power. And you have none. I have more than you think, I said. The Empress's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. I mean that the prince is not the only person who knows the truth. I have allies. People who are loyal to me. People who have been watching you, waiting for the right moment to act. The Empress's face went pale. You're lying. Am I asked. Ask yourself this. If I were lying, would I be standing here so calmly? Would I be looking you in the eye without fear? The Empress was silent for a long moment. I could see the doubt flickering in her eyes, the seeds of suspicion that I had planted. Guards, she said finally. Take her back to the dungeon. We will deal with her later. I was dragged away, but I was not afraid. I had sown the seeds of doubt. I had planted the idea that I was not alone. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. I spent the next few days in the dungeon, waiting. I knew the prince would not abandon me. I knew he would come for me. And I was right. It happened on the third night. I heard a commotion outside, the sounds of fighting. Then the door to my cell burst open, and the prince was standing there, his sword in his hand, his face set in a grim expression. Come, he said, reaching out his hand. We're leaving. I took his hand and followed him out of the dungeon. The palace was in chaos. Guards were fighting guards, loyalists against the Empress's men. The prince led me through the corridors, past the bodies of fallen soldiers, past the flickering torches. We reached the main hall. The Empress was there, surrounded by her remaining guards. Her face was a mask of fury. You cannot escape, she spat. You will never escape. Perhaps, the prince said. But you will not win. He raised his sword, and the guards moved forward. I grabbed a fallen sword from the floor, its weight heavy and unfamiliar in my hands. I had never fought before. I had never even held a weapon. But I was not afraid. I was ready. We fought our way through the hall. I was clumsy, unpracticed, but the prince was a whirlwind of destruction. He cut down the guards one by one, his movements fluid and precise. We reached the doors and burst out into the night. The moon was full, the sky clear. We ran through the gardens, the sounds of the palace fading behind us. We reached the lake and jumped into the waiting boat. The boatman, the same stooped old man, pushed us away from the shore. We sat in silence as the palace disappeared into the mist. I watched it go, my heart heavy with a strange mixture of triumph and sorrow. The prince turned to look at me. Thank you, he said again. For everything. For my life. For my freedom. I shook my head. The fight isn't over yet. The Empress is still alive. General Wei is still free. We still have to win the empire. I know, he said. But we will. Together. The boat cut through the dark water, the only sound the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. I sat across from the prince, my hands still trembling from the fight, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The adrenaline was fading, and in its place came a bone-deep exhaustion that threatened to pull me under. But I could not rest. Not yet. Not while the Empress still drew breath. The prince sat with his back straight, his sword resting across his knees. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone that revealed nothing. But I could feel his gaze on me, heavy and searching, as if he was trying to see through my skin and into my soul. You risked everything for me, he said finally, his voice low and rough. Why, I looked at him, at the man who had been my husband in name only, the man I had barely known in my past life. He was a stranger to me, and yet I had given up everything for him. My safety, my freedom, my life. I had done it without hesitation, without question. Because you are the rightful heir, I said, the words tasting hollow on my tongue. It was true, but it was not the whole truth. The prince's eyes narrowed. That is not the real reason. I looked away, staring out at the dark water. The moon was high overhead, its pale light casting silver ripples across the surface. The boatman hummed a low, tuneless song, his eyes fixed on the horizon. I had a dream, I said finally, the lie coming easily. A dream that the Empress would destroy everything. That the empire would fall into chaos. That I would die, alone and forgotten. I could not let that happen. Not to me. Not to you. The prince was silent for a long moment. I could feel his mind probing mine, searching for the truth. He was a man who had spent his entire life listening to the secrets of others. He could hear the lies beneath the words, the hidden truths that people tried to bury. You are lying, he said softly. But I will not press you. You have earned my trust. For now, that is enough. I let out a slow breath, relief washing over me. The prince had accepted my explanation, or at least pretended to. It was the best I could hope for. We traveled up the river for 3 hours, the boatman guiding us through the winding channels with practiced ease. The safe house was hidden deep in the mountains, a small stone cottage surrounded by thick forest. It was the kind of place that would be impossible to find unless you knew exactly where to look. The boatman dropped us off at a small dock and disappeared into the night without a word. The prince and I stood on the shore, watching him go, the silence heavy between us. We'll be safe here, the prince said, breaking the silence. For now. But we cannot stay long. The Empress will not rest until she finds us. I nodded, my mind already racing ahead. The Empress had been humiliated, exposed, and betrayed. She would be desperate, reckless. She would do anything to reclaim her power. We need allies, I said. People who are loyal to you. People who can help us fight back. The prince's face hardened. My allies have been scattered or killed. The Empress has been working for years to isolate me. There is no one left. There is always someone, I said. You just have to know where to look. He looked at me, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. You speak as if you have already planned everything. I smiled, a tired, knowing smile. I have. I have been planning this for a long time. We spent the next few days in the safe house, hiding from the Empress's men. The cottage was small and sparse, barely more than a single room with a bed and a hearth. But it was warm and dry, and it was safe. The prince was a strange companion. He spoke little, preferring to sit in silence, staring into the fire. But I could feel his mind working, churning through possibilities and strategies. He was a strategist, a man who had been forced to think 10 steps ahead just to survive. And I was his equal. In my past life, I had learned the secrets of the palace, the hidden alliances and secret betrayals. I knew the names of the men who could be turned, the women who could be bribed. I had spent my death planning my revenge, and now I was finally putting those plans into action. One evening, as the sun was setting, I approached the prince. He was sitting by the window, staring out at the forest, his face illuminated by the dying light. We need to move, I said, my voice firm. The Empress will have sent her men to search the mountains. It's only a matter of time before they find us. The prince turned to look at me. Where do you propose we go? To the northern border, I said. There is a garrison there, loyal to your father. The commander, generally, is a man of honor. He will not betray you. The prince's eyes narrowed. Generally is a friend of the Empress's brother. He would never turn against the Wei family. He would, I said. If he knew the truth. If he knew that the Empress was poisoning the Emperor. If he knew that General Wei was complicit in her crimes. General Li is a loyalist. He serves the Emperor, not the Wei family. The prince was silent for a long moment. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between hope and doubt. How do you know all this? He asked finally. How do you know about General Li, about the Empress's crimes, about everything? I looked at him, and for a moment, I was tempted to tell him the truth. To tell him about my past life, about my death, about the second chance I had been given. But I could not. Not yet. The truth was too dangerous, too unbelievable. He would think I was mad. I told you, I said. I had a dream. A dream that showed me the truth about the Empress. About her plans, her allies, her enemies. I have been preparing for this moment for a long time. The prince studied me, his eyes searching my face. Then he nodded slowly. Very well, he said. We will go to the northern border. We will find General Li. And we will fight. The journey to the northern border was long and perilous. We traveled by night, hiding in the shadows, avoiding the main roads. The prince was a skilled survivalist, able to find food and shelter in the wilderness. I learned to follow his lead, to move silently, to watch for danger. We reached the garrison on the 5th day. It was a massive fortress, its walls rising high above the plains. The soldiers were drilling in the courtyard, their movements precise and disciplined. We approached the gates, our hoods pulled low over our faces. The guard stopped us, their hands on their swords. State your business, the guard said, his voice gruff. I need to speak with General Li, I said, keeping my voice steady. Tell him that the night-blooming jasmine is in bloom. The guard's eyes widened. He looked at us, then at the fortress, then back at us. He nodded slowly and disappeared through the gates. We waited in silence, our hearts pounding. I could feel the prince's tension beside me, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. After what felt like an eternity, the gates opened. A tall, broad-shouldered man emerged, his face weathered by years of campaign. He wore the armor of a general, a long sword at his side. I am General Li, he said, his voice deep and commanding. Who are you, and why do you seek me? The prince pushed back his hood, revealing his face. General Li's eyes went wide, his face turning pale. Your Highness, he breathed. I thought you were dead. I am very much alive, the prince said. And I need your help. General Li bowed deeply, his voice trembling with emotion. Anything, Your Highness. Anything you need. We were escorted into the fortress, given warm clothes and hot food. General Li listened as the prince told him the truth about the Empress, about the poisoning, about the conspiracy. His face darkened with each revelation, his fists clenching at his sides. The Wei family has betrayed the empire, General Li said, his voice cold with rage. They will pay for their crimes. I swear it on my life. General Li's men were loyal and numerous. He commanded a garrison of 5,000 soldiers, all of them trained and battle-ready. With their help, we could march on the capital and overthrow the Empress. But first, we needed a plan. The Empress had the Imperial Guard, the city's defenses, and the support of the noble families. We could not simply march on the capital and expect to win. We need to divide her forces, I said, looking at the map spread across the table. The Empress has two main allies, General Wei and the Imperial Guard. If we can draw General Wei's army away from the capital, we can take the city with the garrison. The prince nodded, his eyes fixed on the map. How do we draw General Wei away? We use the second prince, I said. He is the Empress's weakness. If he is in danger, she will send General Wei to protect him. We create a false threat, a rumor of an assassination plot. General Wei will rush to the second prince's side, leaving the capital vulnerable. The prince looked at me, a hint of admiration in his eyes. You're a strategist, he said. A brilliant strategist. I smiled, a small, tired smile. I have had time to think. We put the plan into motion. General Li sent his fastest riders to spread the rumor of a plot against the second prince. Within a week, the rumor had reached the capital. As I had predicted, General Wei rushed to the second prince's side, taking his best men with him. The capital was now vulnerable. The Imperial Guard was still there, but they were stretched thin, their numbers reduced. With General Li's 5,000 soldiers, we could take the city. The night of the attack, I stood at the head of the army, my heart pounding with fear and hope. The prince was beside me, his face set in a grim expression. General Li was in command, his voice booming across the ranks. Tonight, we fight for the empire, General Li shouted. Tonight, we fight for justice. For the emperor. For the crown prince. The army cheered, their voices echoing across the plains. We marched on the capital, our torches blazing in the darkness. The battle was fierce and bloody. The Imperial Guard fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. General Li's soldiers pushed through the gates, their swords flashing in the torchlight. I fought beside the prince, my sword heavy in my hand. I was not a warrior, but desperation gave me strength. I cut down enemy soldiers, my movements clumsy but effective. We reached the palace just as dawn was breaking. The Empress was waiting for us in the main hall, surrounded by her remaining guards. Her face was pale, her eyes wild with rage. You think you have won, she spat, her voice shrill. You think you can destroy me? I will never surrender. I will die before I let you take my throne. Then die, the prince said, his voice cold and hard. He raised his sword and charged. The Empress's guards moved to protect her, but they were no match for the prince's fury. He cut them down one by one, his movements precise and deadly. I stood back, watching the battle unfold. The Empress was alone now, her guards dead or fled. She backed away, her face twisted with fear. Please, she begged, her voice breaking. Please don't kill me. I'll do anything. I'll give you anything. The prince hesitated. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between justice and mercy. Kill her, I said, my voice cold. She will never stop. She will never change. She will always be a threat. The prince looked at me, then back at the Empress. He raised his sword, and I saw the determination in his eyes. Goodbye, mother, he said, and brought the blade down. The blade did not fall. The prince's arm trembled, the sword hovering inches from the Empress's throat. Her eyes were wide with terror, her face a mask of desperation, but there was something else there too. A flicker of triumph. She knew something we did not. Kill me, and you will never find the emperor, she hissed, her voice barely a whisper. I have hidden him. He will die alone, and you will be remembered as the son who let his father perish. The prince's jaw tightened. Where is he? Let me go, she said, her voice gaining strength. Let me leave the palace, and I will tell you where he is. I stepped forward, my heart pounding. She's lying. She's stalling for time. General Wei is on his way back. We have to finish this now. The prince did not move. His eyes were locked on the Empress's, searching for the truth. I could see the conflict in his face, the desperate need to save his father warring with the knowledge that the Empress would never keep her word. "Your Highness, we do not have time," General Lee said from behind us, his voice urgent. "Our scouts report that General Wei's army is less than a day's march away. If we do not secure the capital before he arrives, we will be trapped." The prince lowered his sword. The Empress let out a shaky breath, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "Release her," the prince said, his voice flat. "We will find the Emperor ourselves." "No," I said, grabbing his arm. "You cannot trust her. She will betray us the moment she is free." "I know," he said, looking at me with tired eyes. "But I cannot risk my father's life. He is the Emperor. He is my responsibility." I wanted to argue, wanted to scream at him to see reason. But I saw the determination in his eyes, the stubborn refusal to give up on his father. I knew that look. I had seen it in my own reflection. The Empress was escorted from the hall, her chains removed. She walked with her head held high, a queen in exile. I watched her go, a cold dread settling in my stomach. She was not defeated. She was regrouping. "Find the Emperor," the prince ordered, his voice echoing through the hall. "Search every corner of the palace. He cannot have gone far." The soldiers dispersed, their footsteps echoing through the corridors. I stood beside the prince, my mind racing. The Empress had hidden the Emperor somewhere in the palace. But where? I thought back to my past life, to the secrets I had uncovered in my final days. I remembered a hidden chamber beneath the Empress's private quarters, a place she used to store her most precious possessions. If the Emperor was anywhere, he was there. "Your Highness," I said, my voice low. "I know where he is. Follow me." The prince looked at me, his eyes widening with surprise. But he did not question me. He simply nodded and followed. I led him through the winding corridors of the palace, past the guards and servants who bowed as we passed. We reached the Empress's private quarters, a lavish suite of rooms decorated with silk and gold. I pushed open the door to her bedchamber and crossed to the far wall. "Behind the painting," I said, pointing to a large portrait of the Empress's family. "There is a hidden passage. I saw it in a dream." The prince moved the painting aside, revealing a small door set into the wall. He pushed it open, and a narrow staircase descended into darkness. "Stay behind me," he said, drawing his sword. We descended the staircase, our footsteps echoing in the silence. The air grew colder, the walls damp with moisture. At the bottom, a heavy wooden door barred our way. The prince pushed it open, and we stepped into a small, dimly lit chamber. The Emperor was there, lying on a narrow cot. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, his breathing shallow. He was barely conscious, his body ravaged by the poison that had been slowly killing him for months. "Father," the prince breathed, rushing to his side. "Father, I am here. I am here." The Emperor's eyes fluttered open. He looked at his son, and a faint smile crossed his lips. "My son," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You came for me." "Always," the prince said, his voice thick with emotion. "I will always come for you." I stood in the doorway, watching the scene unfold. The prince was no longer the cold, distant man I had known. He was a son, desperate to save his father. I saw the love in his eyes, the fierce determination to protect the man who had raised him. "Your Highness, we need to move him," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "General Wei's army is coming. We need to get the Emperor to safety." The prince nodded, lifting his father in his arms. The Emperor was light, his body ravaged by illness. We carried him up the stairs, back into the palace. The soldiers were waiting for us, their faces grim. "We need to evacuate the palace," General Lee said. "General Wei's army will be here within hours. We cannot hold the city against his forces." "Then we don't fight," I said, an idea forming in my mind. "We negotiate." The prince looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "Negotiate with General Wei. He is a traitor. He will never surrender." "He will if we have something he wants," I said. "The Empress. She is still in the palace. If we offer to trade her for the Emperor's safe passage, he might accept." The prince was silent for a long moment. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between his desire for justice and the need to protect his father. It's the only way, I said. We are outnumbered. We cannot win a direct confrontation. But we can buy time. Time to regroup, to rally our allies, to build a stronger army. The prince nodded slowly. Very well. Prepare a message for General Wei. Tell him we have his sister. Tell him that if he wants her back, he will withdraw his army and allow us to leave the capital. I drafted the message myself, my hand steady despite the fear coursing through my veins. The messenger rode out to meet General Wei's army, the fate of the empire hanging on his words. We waited. The hours crawled by, each one feeling like an eternity. The prince stayed by his father's side, his face a mask of worry. I paced the corridors, my mind churning with plans and contingencies. Finally, the messenger returned. He was pale, his clothes covered in dust. General Wei has agreed to the terms, he said, his voice trembling. He will withdraw his army if we release the empress. But he demands that we leave the city within the hour. The prince nodded, his face grim. Prepare the carriages. We leave now. We fled the capital, the emperor's carriage leading the way. General Wei's army watched from a distance, their torches blazing in the darkness. I rode beside the prince, my heart heavy with sorrow. We had won the battle, but the war was far from over. We traveled to the northern garrison, where General Li's forces were stationed. The emperor was given the best medical care available, his condition slowly improving. The prince worked tirelessly, rallying his allies and building a coalition to oppose General Wei. But the empress was still out there. She had been released to her brother, and she was plotting her revenge. We had traded the emperor's life for her freedom, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she struck again. One night, as I was sitting alone in my quarters, the prince came to see me. His face was tired, but his eyes were bright with determination. I need to ask you something, he said, his voice low. And I need you to be honest with me. I nodded, my heart pounding. Anything. How do you know so much, he asked, his eyes searching my face. About the empress, about General Wei, about the hidden passages in the palace. You speak as if you have lived this life before. I was silent for a long moment. I had been expecting this question, dreading it. But I knew I could not lie to him. Not anymore. I said, my voice barely a whisper. I have lived this life before. I died in the cold palace, poisoned by the empress's hand. And then I woke up. I woke up on the night of the beating, the night I was supposed to be sent to my death. I have been given a second chance. The prince stared at me, his face unreadable. I could not tell if he believed me. I could not tell if he thought I was mad. You are not lying, he said finally. I have heard many lies in my life. I can hear the truth in your voice. I let out a shaky breath, relief flooding through me. I know it is hard to believe. But it is the truth. I believe you, he said. And I am grateful. Grateful for everything you have done. For saving my father. For saving me. He reached out and took my hand, his touch warm and gentle. I do not know what the future holds, he said. But I know that I want you by my side. Not as a pawn, not as a tool, but as my partner, my equal. Tears welled in my eyes. In my past life, I had been alone, forgotten, discarded. Now I was being offered something I had never dared to hope for. A future. A purpose. A partner. I would be honored, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. The war continued for another year. General Wei and the Empress retreated to their strongholds, gathering their forces for a final confrontation. The prince led his army into battle, his courage and determination inspiring his soldiers to fight with unparalleled ferocity. I was by his side throughout it all. I helped him plan his strategies, analyze his enemies, and navigate the treacherous world of politics. I was no longer a pawn. I was a player. A queen. The final battle took place on the plains outside the capital. The prince's army clashed with General Wei's forces, the fighting fierce and brutal. I watched from a hilltop, my heart pounding with fear and hope. The prince fought like a demon, his sword cutting through the enemy ranks. He was unstoppable, a force of nature that could not be contained. I saw General Wei fall, his body crumpling to the ground. I saw the Empress flee, her dreams of power crumbling around her. The battle was won. The prince was victorious. He entered the capital as a hero, the people cheering his name. He was crowned emperor, his father having passed away peacefully in his sleep the night before. I stood beside him at the coronation, my hand in his. The crowd roared their approval, their voices echoing through the halls. By my side, not as a shadow, but as an equal, the emperor said, his voice ringing through the hall. This is my empress. My partner. My equal. I looked at him, at the man who had been a stranger to me in my past life. He was no longer a stranger. He was my husband. My partner. My equal. And together, we would build a new empire. An empire of justice, of hope, of love. An empire that would last for 1,000 years. I had been given a second chance, and I had not wasted it. I had fought for my future, and I had won. The past was behind me. The future was ours.